JT Miller and Elias Pettersson might be on the trade block for the Vancouver Canucks. Should the Devils pursue one of them in order to add more scoring? We have a lot to break down in today's episode of Locked On Devils. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Elias scores! Oh, Stevens stepped up, nailed him. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here at the Locked On Network. I'm your host, College Hockey Play-by-Play announcer, Devils Wire Pucks and Pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. When this episode goes live, the New Jersey Devils are scheduled to play their Hudson River rival, the New York Rangers. But for today's episode, we're going to talk about Dougie Hamilton's season because I figured I talked about Eric Halla's mid-season report, if you would, in the previous episode. And I've been seeing a lot of Dougie Hamilton hate on social media. It feels like I do this type of episode year after year after year, defending Dougie Hamilton, and this particular episode isn't going to be any different. That's what we're going to do in the first segment. Then in the second and third segment, as promised, I will talk about the trade circumstance surrounding JT Miller and Elias Pettersson, because there seems to be some drama up in Vancouver, and maybe the Devils can aim for a blockbuster deal. Financially, I don't know how it's going to work, but I'm going to save that for the second segment. And the third segment, I will give my final verdict as to how the Devils should approach the upcoming trade deadline. Still a ways away, but it's never too early to talk about silly season. All right, let's talk about Dougie Hamilton. Why am I talking about Dougie in particular? Well, prior to the Seattle Kraken game, the Devils were on a 4-game losing streak. And a lot of people were saying that the Devils' defense has been porous. And I will admit, I said a couple episodes ago when I was recapping the game between the Devils and Kraken, in the first period, the Devils got off to a really good start, but there was a Dougie Hamilton turnover late in the period that shifted the momentum back into the Kraken's favor, and the Devils weren't really as dominant as they were to start the game. And that basically sparked a whole thing on social media where people were saying like they were getting tired of Dougie Hamilton's defense. Maybe the Devils should look to move on from him. And I understand the frustration, but let's look at this from a realistic perspective. Dougie Hamilton originally signed a 7-year, $63 million deal. And he will not become an unrestricted free agent until 2028. He has a no movement clause, so he does have a say as to whether or not he wants to leave the Devils. Let's just get that out the way. So it would be rather hard for the Devils to move on from Dougie Hamilton, whether they want to or not. And when looking at his numbers, he has appeared in 43 games. He has 5 goals, 21 assists for a grand total of 26 points. And fun fact for you, a good chunk of his points come via the power play. 4 out of his 5 goals have come on the man advantage. So he is 5th on the team in power play goals. He has 8 power play assists, which ranks 3rd on the team. And going back to a point that a lot of people love to bring up, Dougie Hamilton does cough up the puck a decent amount of times. In fact, more than a decent amount of times. He has 67 giveaways this season, which is 1st on the team. But to his credit, he has 16 takeaways, which is 2nd on the team. He has 55 hits, 5th on the team. He has an offensive point share rating of 2.1, 6th on the team, a 5.1 defensive point share rating, 4th on the team, which gives him a point share rating of 7.1. That leads the team. And if you need a refresher, point shares is an estimate of the number of points contributed by a player. So a good amount of the points by the Devils are coming from the hands of Dougie Hamilton. And here's something else I found interesting. Expected goals for 38, first on the team. Expected goals against 30.7, also first on the team. So when it comes to the Devils scoring a goal or sacrificing a goal, when Dougie Hamilton is out there, they kind of break even. I found that somewhat comical. Now, the important question is Dougie Hamilton an important piece to the Devils roster? And it should be a resounding yes. He is vital on the Devils roster, and he is not going to be going anywhere anytime soon, for better or for worse. But for me, it's for the better for a few reasons. The first being is the power play. Dougie Hamilton has one of the best slap shots in the entire NHL. When the Devils are on the man advantage, you just see Dougie Hamilton let a shot rip, and sometimes the puck can find its way into the slot where he can either score or one of his teammates is there to collect it and score the power play goal. Once again, that's why he has 12 points via the power play. Dougie Hamilton is a huge catalyst on the man advantage, and we saw that last year, or we didn't see it last year because he missed 75% of the season, which leads into my bigger point, which is the Devils are not a better team without Dougie Hamilton. Case in point, last season, Dougie Hamilton was one of the first players to go down with a major injury, and a lot of people were saying the Devils' defense is going to improve when Dougie Hamilton is not in the lineup. Well, a few games went by. The Devils didn't improve defensively. And as the season progressed, they still didn't improve defensively. So I wasn't really seeing the point in which people were saying, like, the Devils' defense is going to be leaps and bounds better now that Dougie is not out there. Look, I get it. Dougie does cough up the puck a lot. He turns the puck over, but Jack Hughes also coughs up the puck a lot. And I'm not trying to make an excuse because that does need to be addressed and that does need to be fixed. But once again, why are people willing to give Jack sort of a pass is because he can make up for it offensively. And Dougie can do the same thing. Just remember, he's a defenseman. So the points aren't going to really come that consistently compared to Jack Hughes. I'm just putting that out there. Dougie Hamilton is a great player. He's not perfect. Lord knows he makes a lot of mistakes. But let me just make this clear. The Devils, as proven last year, are not a better team without Dougie Hamilton. So for anybody who's saying Dougie should be dealt away, the Devils should move on from him, realistically, Dougie Hamilton will leave New Jersey when Dougie Hamilton wants to leave New Jersey. I just advise you to look at the Devils while they're on the power play and see how Dougie Hamilton operates, because Luke Hughes took Dougie Hamilton's spot on the power play last season when Dougie went down with his injury. And the difference between Luke and Dougie, night and day. Luke's still a very good player, and he still knew how to generate some points while on the man advantage. But the problem is nobody feared Luke Hughes' slap shot. People fear Dougie Hamilton's slap shot, and I will die on the hill and say one of the best in the NHL. So Dougie Hamilton is sticking in New Jersey for better or for worse, whether you like it or not. Okay, we're going to talk some silly season momentarily involving a couple players in Vancouver. No, not Quinn Hughes. That's just a pipe dream. But before we talk about Pettersson and Miller, let me tell you guys about Game Time. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. Now, Game Time has made it even easier to get tickets to your favorite events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Maybe you're looking for some Super Bowl tickets. I've actually used Game Time in the past to purchase myself some MLB and NBA tickets, and I had a blast when I went to those games. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time, everybody. Okay, courtesy of our buddy James Nichols of New Jersey Hockey Now, he recently published an article talking about the drama happening up in Vancouver. Will the Canucks actually go through and try to trade away either Miller or Pettersson? If you want to hear James's thoughts on the matter, I will leave a link in the description if you want to read the article for yourself. I personally did. I found it quite compelling. And I wanted to talk about it on this show because Pettersson and Miller, those are two big name players. And could the Devils eye them and try to get one of them down here? Well, I think the big question is, will the Canucks actually go through with it? Well, Elliot Friedman recently talked about the matter, and here's what he had to say, quote, "In calling around, this is what I can tell. The Canucks are definitely looking at the market for both players and should be prepared for all outcomes. There's really three of them. Neither gets dealt, one of them gets dealt, or both get dealt. That's on the table, and I don't want to predict the likelihood of any particular scenario, but I think all three of those outcomes are possible." Okay, so Friedman just basically put three outcomes on the table. Either it will happen, both of them will be out of Vancouver, one of them is out of Vancouver, or nothing happens at all because both Pettersson and Miller have significant time remaining on their respective contracts. And obviously, when big name players hit the market, a lot of people on the Devils discourse, they like to make their own assumptions and say, like, maybe the Devils should pursue this player. Well, let's talk about it on the show, and I will share my thoughts on the matter. All right, let's look at Elias Pettersson. He has appeared in 34 games. He has 10 goals, 18 assists for a grand total of 28 points. One of the things that the Devils do need is that they need some more scoring on their bottom six. But obviously, when you're dealing with Pettersson and Miller, kind of a different circumstance. And remember that because I'm going to talk about that a little later in the episode. But if I'm being completely honest, I don't think the Devils can afford Pettersson, or it would be just too difficult to try to get his services because he's being paid annually $11.6 million, and he has this season and 5 more seasons remaining on his deal, meaning he will not be an unrestricted free agent until 2032. So once again, if I'm just looking at this realistically, I don't think the Devils are going to go after Pettersson, the more expensive option due to his contract. And keep in mind, there are a couple of key assets on the Devils' current roster that are in need of new contracts come the end of this season. But let's focus on JT Miller, who's also a center. He's being paid annually $8 million. He has this season and 3 more seasons remaining on his deal. He will become an unrestricted free agent in 2030. He has appeared in 30 games. He has 8 goals, 21 assists for a grand total of 29 points. Now, the big question is, what do the Canucks want for someone like Miller? Well, here's another quote from Friedman. "Other things I can tell you just from making the calls, I think if the Canucks do make a trade, they're going to need a center in return. I know the Canucks right now are concerned about the defense with Quinn Hughes and Philip Hronek injured, but I believe the team has prioritized a center in a return more than the blue line. Obviously, they'd be trading a center if one or both was to go. So part of the package, and I would assume it would be a package back for either of those two players." Okay. So Friedman is speculating that the Canucks are probably going to ask for a center to replace one of those players if and when they are dealt away. So who would the Devils have to include in this package? Well, dead giveaway, it's going to be Dawson Mercer because I talked about it in the previous episode. I believe Dawson Mercer now becomes the scapegoat in big name trade discussions because he's like the only player on the roster who's serviceable, but doesn't have any clauses to deal with. So he doesn't have a no movement clause, a no trade clause. The Devils have more options when it comes to Dawson Mercer, but here's my problem. That kind of creates a conflict of interest. So let me make something perfectly clear. Pettersson and Miller are two phenomenal players, and I think any team would love to have players of their caliber added to their roster. But remember, what do the Devils need? They need bottom six depth. They don't just need scoring in general, just they need some help on their bottom six because players like Eric Holla, Paul Cotter, Dawson Mercer, they're capable of getting into the score sheet, but as proven as the season has progressed, they're not really good at doing it consistently. If I had to choose the best option when it comes to producing points on the bottom six, I'm obviously going to go with Dawson Mercer. Paul Cotter now has 3 goals in his last 5 games. Hopefully he starts to get it going a little bit more, but it doesn't change the sentiment. The Devils need bottom six depth. And when looking at these contracts for both Pettersson and Miller, it honestly scares me a little bit because it's just like, who else would you have to include in this package? And keep in mind, the Devils are running out of tradable assets. So now you're going to have to maybe look in your minor league system, look into the AHL. Are you going to include Seamus Casey? Are you going to include Shimon Nemitz? Are you going to include Lenny Haminaho? That's something else I'm a little concerned with because no way the Canucks are just going to do a 1-for-1 deal, Mercer for Miller. That's not going to happen. So my thing is just like, I think the Devils can get some more scoring on their bottom six and find some cheaper options out there because the reality of it is that neither Miller or Pettersson are bottom six players. They are top six players. So that kind of creates a conflict of interest. And I'm going to give my final verdict momentarily. But before we continue, let me tell you guys about FanDuel because I want to see you guys make some extra money. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Please remember to always gamble responsibly. Okay, final verdict. Should the Devils aim for a blockbuster move and get either Elias Pettersson or JT Miller? I'm going to say no. And before anyone comes at me, let me just make this perfectly clear. Pettersson and Miller, once again, are two very good players, and any team would be lucky to have them on their roster. But I think the bigger thing is like both Pettersson and Miller are being paid a decent amount of money, and the Devils have to pay Luke Hughes and Jonathan Kovacevic. Then you got Shimon Nemitz not too far behind because not this year, but next year will be the final year of his entry-level contract. So that's something you also have to factor in, which is look at the contracts that the Devils already have on their roster. You really don't want to be up in depth to your eyeballs when it comes to handing out these big-time contracts and you have no wiggle room. You don't want to be stuck. You want to have some options. And the Devils have 2,308,265 in available cap space, if you are curious. But the problem I'm seeing with this move is that the Canucks are going to ask for a center, and the only player that they might even entertain of trading for is Dawson Mercer. But once again, the Devils need some help on their bottom six. They don't need another top six asset. And call me crazy, but I think the top six is good as is because I think Jesper Bratt, Jack Hughes, and Andre Palat, I think those three complement each other really well. Bratter and Jack, they're two fast, dynamic players who are really good at racking up the points. And you got Andre Palat, more defensive-minded, but creates possession for both Bratt and Hughes. And Sheldon Keefe talked about that a lot. And then for the other line, you got Nico Hischier, Timo Meier, Stefan Noesen. Timo Meier is a power forward. Nico Hischier is a two-way player. And Stefan Noesen, capable of scoring, but he knows his job is to add more snarl on that line. Be more aggressive, physical. He's not afraid to play rough and nasty and get some of those net front goals. So I think the top six is good, but the bottom six needs some work. And trading away Dawson Mercer, that doesn't help your bottom six. And if you were to add someone like Miller to the roster, you put him on the same line as Jack Hughes, then you're going to have to move Andre Palat to the bottom six. That's not really going to help anything. So my thing is like, yes, these are good players, but it doesn't fix the Devils' issue. And similar to what I said over the summer when it came to the whole Brady Tkachuk fiasco, I said, I think there's a cheaper option out there. Yes, the Devils need more physicality, but I don't think they need to really aim for someone like Brady Tkachuk because you're going to have to give up an arm and a leg in order to get his services. And you also have to factor in his contract. And the Devils took the cheaper route by adding players like Stefan Noesen, Paul Cotter, Brendan Dillon, Brett Pesce. And I was probably one of the few people that was saying like Brady Tkachuk's not going to happen. I'm sure it's an entertaining idea, but realistically, I don't see it happening. And a few people, not many, were saying I was this, that, and the third. And I was just like, okay, watch what happens. And I was proven right. So I think it's going to be the same thing with Miller and Pettersson. Two great players, but I think the Devils can find some cheaper options in order to add more scoring when it comes to depth. But let me know your thoughts. Do you think the Devils should pursue Elias Pettersson or JT Miller from the Vancouver Canucks? Do you even think that they're going to be dealt away? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on podcast streaming service. Hit me up on my personal X Page app at TreyMatt4 or the show's X Page app at Locked On Devils. As for today's episode, that's all the time I have for you. Continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day in New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys next episode. Thanks for listening once again.